In 2008, a red dot moved beneath the wing of a government surveillance plane over the Peru-Brazil border. Through the lens of a long-range camera, what came into focus wasn't a deer or a tree canopy. It was a man, naked except for red body paint, bow raised, aiming directly at the sky. The photo went viral. Headlines screamed of a long-lost tribe untouched by time. But behind the spectacle was a quieter truth. This man was not lost. He knew exactly where he was. We were the ones who forgot him. In the decades since, more tribes like his have been spotted, some documented from a distance, others approached and photographed through the leaves. Always surrounded by myth, sensationalism, and misunderstanding. As of today, we're counting more than 100 of these tribes. Some don't even have names. The most well-known ones are the Sentinelese, especially because of their violent rejection and murder of a Christian evangelist back in 2018. All of these tribes are uncontacted, but that's a kind of a lie, or at least very oversimplified. These people are not prehistoric, and they don't live like their ancestors did 10,000 years ago for the most part. They continued to evolve as we did, just following a different path. So, the Panoan-speaking group found in the Amazon region are merely the survivors of a collapse that wiped out 90% of their ancestors, maybe even more. And their story of retreat, resistance, and survival against the entire weight of modern civilization is one of the greatest human epics never told, not because it's buried in ancient ruins, but because it's still happening. We like to imagine that human history moves in straight lines. First you hunt, then you farm, you invent writing, you build cities and invent Wi-Fi. Done. But scattered deep inside the Amazon are people who opted out. People who live without roads, without metal, without maps. People like the Machu Picchu, the Corubo, the Flasherios. Their names are given by outsiders. We don't know what they call themselves. Some of them speak languages found nowhere else on Earth. Others have dialects only distantly related to any known linguistic family. And some, according to field reports, seem to speak languages that have no family at all. They are not uncontacted, they are post-contact. Their ancestors were likely part of the great indigenous civilizations that once filled the Amazon basin. Cultures with complex agriculture, engineering, astronomy, and oral traditions stretching back thousands of years. But in the 16th century, the flood came. First came the soldiers, then the swords, then the sickness, smallpox, measles, influenza, diseases to which indigenous people had no resistance. They swept through continent faster than any army. The death toll? Up to 90%, according to demographic models published in Nature, Ecology and Evolution in 2019. Entire cultures disappeared within a generation. Those who didn't die fled. Some were chased deeper into the jungles by slavers, colonists and missionaries. Some ran because there was nowhere else to go. Others chose isolation deliberately to protect their children, their gods, their languages. And what emerged from that retreat weren't cavemen. They were refugees, and what they preserved in the depths of the forest wasn't just survival, it was memory. A different version of human continuity, one that resisted absorption, resisted annihilation. In the eyes of the modern world, they vanished. But to themselves, they never went anywhere. They didn't lose civilization, they left it. To outsiders, the Amazon has always been imagined as a kind of Eden, pristine, untouched, eternal. But the truth is far stranger. The forest is not an ancient wilderness. It's a palimpsest, a living map of civilizations that once were and then weren't. For centuries, scholars assumed the interior of the Amazon was too poor in nutrients to support complex societies. Green hell, they called it, too wet, too hot, and too hostile. And yet, in recent decades, the ground itself began to disagree. In 2022, satellite surveys and LiDAR imaging pierced the canopy and revealed the unmistakable shapes of earthworks. Circular enclosures, causeways, canals, massive geometric forms etched into the soil, some over 2,000 years old, others older. They weren't just curiosities, they were urban plans, and they weren't isolated. Dozens, then hundreds, then thousands of these structures emerged across the southern Amazon, evidence of massive planned settlements once home to tens of thousands of people, cities without stone, without metal, but with roads, moats, farming systems, and ceremonial centers. The forests had swallowed them whole, but it hadn't erased them. This was a revelation. The Amazon wasn't just a refuge, it had been a civilization. And when that civilization collapsed, it didn't die the way we expect. It dissolved. Not through war or fire or some epic conquest, but through a slow motion unraveling. Disease arrived long before direct contact. The forest swallowed villages, and the people who once tilled the land turned inward. They shrank in number. They abandoned fields, temples, markets, and then they vanished into the folds of the trees. And some never came back. Anthropologists call this kind of phenomenon a retraction into refugia, a return to smaller, more mobile ways of life, driven by necessity. And it may have happened not once, but many times. Even before the conquest, climatic events forced ancient Amazonians to move. A study in Science Awakes by Wang, published in 2021, revealed that the Amazon forest itself isn't a monolith. It's a patchwork of microclimates, and during past megadroughts, many regions became uninhabitable. Populations contracted into ecological islands, places where water, soil, and resources remained stable. Those islands preserved people, and those people preserved culture. When the Europeans came, these old instincts kicked in again. The jungle became more than a home. It became armor. And here's the wild part. We can still see this in the genes. Modern genomic analysis of isolated Amazonian groups show deep divergence, lineages that may have split from other American populations over 10,000 years ago. Some even carry trace ancestry from a now extinct branch of early humans with links to Australasia, a ghost population dubbed Population Y, in a study published in Nature by Skoglund in 2015. These are not isolated groups frozen in time. They are the last branches of a tree with roots deeper than we thought possible. They are the children of collapse and of memory. And they didn't just survive the storm. They became the storm's archive. In genetics, there's a term called a population bottleneck. It describes a moment when a species nearly vanishes due to famine, disease, or disaster, and only a small group survives. What's left behind is a threadbare lineage, reduced genetic diversity, and a massive blank in the historical record. For many isolated indigenous groups in the Amazon, that bottleneck isn't theoretical. It's written into their blood. The genomes of these populations tell a story of ancient expansion, followed by sharp, repeated contractions. Once spread across vast landscapes, many of their ancestors were reduced to a handful of survivors huddled around riverbanks, forest plateaus, or highland basins. According to research published in Nature in 2015 and 2020, some of these groups preserve genetic profiles not found anywhere else on Earth, not even among other indigenous Americans. Take the Calitiana people of western Brazil. Their DNA carries unusual signals of founder effects, suggesting their ancestors passed through extreme demographic narrowing. Yet within that narrowness lies something remarkable: traces of ancestry from a lineage not present in most Native American populations, one that appears closer to the ancient ancestors of Melanesians and indigenous Australians. This so-called population Y, named after the Tupi word Yipikura, meaning ancestor, has never been directly identified in any ancient remains. No bones, no graves, no skulls. But their genetic shadow is still alive. Only a few Amazonian groups carry this signal, which means that while most of the Americas experienced population replacement, migration, or collapse, something unique happened here. The forest didn't just preserve a way of life, it preserved a version of us. It's a reminder that the peopling of the Americas was never a straight line. It was branching paths, crisscrossing migrations, and now vanished tributaries. These ghost populations were likely absorbed, overwhelmed, or erased elsewhere, but not here, not entirely. And yet, even these survivors are stitched together with scars. Ancient DNA from across South America shows the fingerprints of catastrophe. Genetic diversity plummets around the time of European arrival. Male lineages especially show signs of collapse. Y chromosome bottlenecks so extreme they rival those caused by pandemics or warfare. Science in 2016 and Nature Communications in 2021 both confirm that what we call contact was in fact a mass extinction event, cultural, linguistic, and biological. And those who made it through, they passed through not one filter, but many. Their existence today is the result of migrations that may go back 20,000 years, demographic cliffs that killed millions, and choices made in the dark, to run, to hide, to stay unspoken. They are not ancient because they failed to evolve, they are ancient because no one caught them. The discovery of the Americas didn't happen in 1492. It happened in waves of pathogens, of steel, of silence. Long before soldiers stepped off the ships, the Amazon was already dying. Diseases moved faster than any horse or fleet, carried by traders, captives, and even the wind. Smallpox, influenza, and measles ravaged the continent ahead of the invaders. By the time the Spanish chroniclers reached the interior, entire villages had collapsed into the soil. No battle, no armies, just graves with no mourners. What followed was worse. In the 17th century, slavers from Portuguese Brazil raided the interior, hunting humans like animals. Survivors fled. In the 19th century, the rubber boom ignited a new wave of violence. Indigenous people were kidnapped, forced into labor, raped, worked to death, or killed for disobedience. One British company in the Putumayo region of modern-day Peru was reported to have murdered 30,000 people in a single decade. The details are preserved in government reports and witness testimony, but not in schoolbooks. The few who escaped this carnage didn't retreat because they feared the world. They retreated because they knew it. They had watched their neighbors vanish. They had seen the priests, the traders, the oil scouts. They understood that contact didn't bring peace or trade, it brought death. So they ran deeper and cut the path behind them. That's why calling them lost is so wrong. They were never lost. They were in hiding. They cut ties with the outside world because the outside world taught them that contact was extinction, that greetings came with chains, that help came with a contract, that survival required silence. And so they vanished on purpose. Their languages fell off the anthropological radar. Their names disappeared from maps. Their stories became oral fossils, passed in whispers, never written down, never shared with outsiders. To preserve their world, they made themselves invisible. Today, their descendants live in the same forests, but not in the same world. They know the sounds of helicopters, the smell of diesel. They've found plastic bottles, machetes, clothes left behind by loggers. They've seen drones, planes, strangers with cameras. In some tragic cases, they've seen their families gunned down by gold miners or narco-pastoralists clearing land. Their isolation isn't cultural inertia, it's a political strategy, because to be seen is still dangerous. To be counted is still to risk being claimed. And yet they are not passive. They are not waiting. They are watching. When researchers first spotted the Flecharios tribe from above, the name wasn't given because of what they lacked, but because of what they had: bows and arrows and a clear message. They were not here to be discovered. They were here to be left alone. From above, they look like shadows, a smear of clearings in a sea of green, thatched roofs, red earth, movement. But from the forest floor, they are legacy incarnate. Groups like the Piripikura, the Awa, and the uncontacted bands of the Javari Valley are often portrayed as the last of their kind, isolated, endangered, untouched. But that framing collapses under scrutiny. These are not relics of a past era. They are survivors of multiple apocalypses. Take the Piripikura. As of the last confirmed report, only 3 members were known to be alive, wandering their ancestral territory with torches and machetes, speaking a language no one else on Earth understands. For decades, they have evaded loggers and poachers, crossing their lands on foot, maintaining a presence just strong enough to preserve their legal claim to the forest. The only thing standing between their extinction and survival, their footprints and a motion sensor camera. Or the Awa, a group so hunted during the 20th century that many fled deep into the forest and began living entirely on the move. For generations, they have avoided roads, paths, and contact. When a member is captured or killed, the rest disappear like smoke. What unites these groups isn't genetics, language, or geography, it's strategy, disappearance as resistance. They live in the margins of the map, not because they lack civilization, but because they understand exactly what it means to be mapped. To be measured is to be targeted. To be documented is to be displaced. So they learned to walk the rainforest like a memory. But what they carry with them is immeasurable. Some speak languages without known relatives, linguistic isolates unconnected to any living family. Others have cultural practices unlike any neighboring tribe. One group paints their bodies not with designs but with maps, constellations of trails, river bends, and hidden fruit trees. Another performs rituals timed to the flowering of a tree species that no botanist has fully described. These aren't fossils, they are knowledge systems, and they encode a world that existed long before contact and may not exist after. Even their technology reflects refinement, not lack. Bows tuned for specific animal weights, houses positioned to catch seasonal breezes, fire techniques that leave no smoke, hunting strategies that change with the moon phase. What we mistake for simplicity is, in many cases, deliberate impermanence. To leave no trace isn't failure, it's mastery of both environment and history. And yet, despite their caution, they are not frozen. They adapt constantly. They track airplane routes. They reuse iron machete heads left by loggers, remaking them into spears. They mimic the sounds of modern tools to scare off intruders. They do not reject the modern world, they survive it. In a world that erased nearly everyone like them, they're not just clinging on, they're winning, quietly, invisibly, defiantly. Not because they hold on to the past, but because they remember what forgetting costs. When we talk about the disappearance of uncontacted peoples, we often frame it as a cultural tragedy, a lost language, a vanishing custom, a song we'll never hear again. But the truth is, the loss cuts deeper than symbolism. What's at stake isn't just knowledge, it's biological diversity, ecological intelligence, and evolutionary heritage tens of thousands of years in the making. Let's start with the body. Isolated indigenous groups carry microbiomes unlike any seen in the industrialized world. In a 2015 study published in Science Advances, researchers analyzed the gut flora of uncontacted Yanomami individuals. What they found stunned them. These people harbored the richest and most diverse microbial ecosystems ever recorded in humans, including entire species of bacteria unknown to science. This isn't just trivia. The microbiome governs everything from digestion to mental health to immune response. And in the West, it's collapsing under processed foods and antibiotics. Losing these populations means losing models of health the modern world is desperate to recover. Then there's the immune system. Studies in Nature and Cell have shown that indigenous groups who remained isolated into the 20th century retained ancestral immune profiles, shaped by millennia of exposure to unique pathogens, insects and parasites. Their resistance patterns, viral histories and cellular behavior offer insight into how humans once balanced survival in microbial environments we no longer understand. Some groups even exhibit adaptive traits linked to climate and altitude, similar to the Denisovan-derived high-altitude genes seen in Himalayan populations. Others, like the Suri, carry unique responses to UV radiation or vector-borne illness. Every extinction here is an evolutionary erasure. It's not just biology. The landscapes these people live in, the forests, the rivers and mountains are shaped by their hands. Recent studies using satellites and soil analysis show that large portions of the Amazon aren't natural at all. They're anthropogenic, managed for centuries using fire, crop rotation, tree planting and selective enrichment. The forest doesn't hide them, it remembers them. The nuts you buy at the supermarket, Brazil nuts, cacao, acai, were often first cultivated by peoples we now call uncontacted. Their ancestors engineered the forest to be edible, renewable, sustainable. The forest, in a way, is their library, and if they disappear, the forest forgets how to feed us. And then there's language. Languages aren't just codes for talking. They're operating systems, ways of carving up reality. Some indigenous languages in the Amazon have no fixed past or future tense. Time flows as experience, not chronology. Others count in threes or not at all. Some have a dozen different words for green, each denoting a different medicinal plant. When we lose a language, we don't just lose words. we lose ways of thinking that we didn't even know were possible. This is what's at risk every time an illegal road cuts through the forest, every time a mine poisons a river, every time a drone gets too close, every time we mistake silence for absence. These people are not museum pieces, they are living archives. And if they fall, it's not just they who vanish, it's the only record we have of whole chapters of human potential, ways of living, feeling, knowing, resisting, that existed outside of empire, outside of capital, outside of everything we thought was inevitable. In a world obsessed with the future, they are reminders of alternative presents we've already lost. The forest is not silent, nor is it empty of human life. It hums with the outlines of stories we don't know how to read, languages we don't know how to talk, the trails we didn't notice, the fires never seen but long extinguished. Every rustle in the canopy, every path that suddenly stops, might mark the edge of a world deliberately hidden from ours. We call them uncontacted, as if that's a flaw in their timeline, as if they're waiting for us to bring light. But maybe the truth is simpler. Maybe they saw what contact really meant, because to them progress arrived with bullets. But not just bullets, with books that burned older books, with gods who demanded the silence of older gods, with diseases no one intended to bring and a cruelty no one pretended to stop. Self-reflecting about our old ways, the Europeans didn't just kill people, they killed ways of being. The goal was to bring civilization to these primitives. They were so technologically below that their lifestyle could only be inferior. That's how, in the Americas, entire civilizations were erased. By sword, by scripture, by supply chain, and by diseases, even if diseases were totally involuntary. They turned forests into assets, languages into problems, bodies into tools. And the best way to turn that into an acceptable quest was to bring enlightenment to the natives, wherever they were from. That's a process they had already rehearsed on themselves. Long before they crossed the oceans, the older gods were buried in Europe. In conquest, in fire, in slavery, books, and so on. Celtic groves, Greek oracles, Norse pantheons, animist rites, the Roman Empire became the Christian Church. And from that fusion came an unshakable idea. There is only one right way to live, and it is ours. They conquered their own memory first. By the time they looked outward, they no longer saw other ways of life as alternatives. They saw them as errors. To find a people was to fix them. To fix them was to change them, and to change them was to make them disappear, them or their culture. In the Americas, diseases were merely a facilitator, one would say. So the ones who remained just vanished, not because they were behind, because they knew what was coming next. Just imagine the impact of seeing your whole tribe being wiped out by an invisible force you understand nothing about, leaving you and maybe a bunch of lucky others alive. But for how long? Enough to kill any wish to make contact with anyone, in my opinion, watching, listening, sometimes leaving signs, a broken twig, a footprint, an empty shelter, a flash of red paint across a tree trunk. Their arrows are still sharp, their silence is still strategic. They are the memory of every future that didn't choose conquest. Some paths don't have names, at least not known to us, and that's their only way to resist and survive. Civilization is not the only way humans used to live. Forgetting isn't always a failure. To vanish can be a form of victory. Because in their world, extinction isn't final. It's what you escape by never being seen. And If they have anything to teach us, it's this. Maybe we should reflect on ourselves. We are evolving in a society that is slowly killing every other civilization and culture. Throughout history, mostly by force, but in modern days, it's just by coexisting with them. And when they resist, either they're strong enough to withstand the frontal shock or they disappear in the forest, leaving nothing but silence behind them. If this story reframed how you see isolation, not as backwardness, but as resilience, don't let it end there. Like the video if it shifted something in you. Subscribe for more deep dives into the lives and legacies history almost forgot. And drop a comment. What story of uncontacted tribes shook you the most? Your curiosity helps these voices echo further. Every click, every share helps keep their stories alive without dragging them into the light. Until next time, keep listening to the echoes.